Okay. Well, more toolkit discussion. Um, been going back and forth a little bit. We have a little bit more uh, that's additional to our toolkit requirements for underpinning of the system. These are things that run extraneous to the system. So we're going to be covering a couple of questions that came up in conference on the previous 35 points, and then we'll have an additional like 15 on that. So it is 2023101200330. So we had some questions that came up in conference, and we're discussing this with Satan in particular, but there were others who brought these things up in consortium and other venues like Vox. So for the asset registration and tracking component, there was specifically the question of, okay, well, is food considered an asset in this configuration? No, it's a consumable, something that would become part of you. So then the question was, well, what about drugs, man? No, drugs would not be considered an asset either, something that's a consumable. So then there was the question of, well, what about ammunition? No, we would not have asset registration and tracking for ammunition. And so then the question was, well, what about guns? What about firearms? No, we would not require asset registration and tracking for firearms either. If a government wants to do that, okay. But in general, food, ammunition, firearms, drugs, these are all matters of family integrity at the civilian level. Besides, at the military level, you need to be able to transition these things in particular, along with military operations, man. You just do. This is like 4 core components to military operation. In terms of your dailies and being able to function, if you have those 4 things, then you've got it made, man. So why wouldn't a firearm be considered an asset, a thing of value? Well, it would cost money to acquire it. You would produce it as a product, yeah. But in terms of tagging it with a parity lock of always knowing where that is actually, it would be a threat to sovereignty, wouldn't it? So we're not tracking that. Food. It's a matter of basic family integrity to have food. There have been suggestions in recent years of, well, we need to track how much food people are buying and how much they have and how much they're storing and get into all of that. No. If someone wants to fill up their pantry with food, if they want to stockpile food and they're storing it well, that's their fucking business, isn't it? Are we going to track that as an asset? No. Is that something that was specifically requested to be tracked? Yes. To my dying breath, that's not something we're going to track. To my dying breath, ammunition is not something we're going to track. To my dying breath, firearms, not something we're going to track. To my dying breath, drugs is not something we're going to track. So then the question is, if everybody's got a basic standards agreement and government, for example, doesn't want drugs in their territory of specific types, okay, that's part of basic standards, which would also include if you're the one manufacturing and producing and distributing drugs, well, It's part of your basic standards agreement, which affects the validity of your keys to abide by that. I don't think they're going to screw with that, especially if they have markets where it is acceptable. Besides, I think for the most part, governments, if you have drugs and you have acceptable dosing, packaging, countermeasure, counseling, follow through, you show up to a gate going through with 6 keys of Coke and your packaging, and it's got the information sheet with it for dosing, potency, and countermeasures, and you've got those with you too. Okay, have a nice day. That would all be specified in the standards, basic standards agreement, man. On the other hand, if you have a government that specifically disallowed that and been like, no, we're not gonna have that shit, and you show up there, well, that gets referred to enforcement on, well, who exactly the fuck authorized this transfer, man? You put a trace on it, well, okay. Individual acting alone. That key is then, they can't get in through that gate anymore. They can't enter that territory anymore, whatsoever. I think people will be a lot more compliant than people are thinking they will. When it comes down to a case of, well, your key is bound to you. And what you do matters. And your integrity matters. Things are going to be a little different in this paradigm. So another 130 was military diplomatic network. So it came up, well, okay, if clandestine operations are not allowed when this is in place, well, what about what the fuck we're doing now? Which Vox basically is plugged into every fucking military. And it's totally off record. A lot like, yeah. So, what about that? Oh, okay, we all know that shit's going on, so, okay, fine. We're relying on that to produce this. And that's our means of input and information exchange now. So, okay, we'll work with that. After basic standards agreement and implementation of this thing, undeclared clandestine operations outside your territory would be considered an act of war, and you'd get referred to enforcement for targeting. Everybody's on the same page with that. So, new stuff that wasn't previously covered. We have 136. Covenant standard replacing contract specialization group. What's covenant versus contract? Well, let's start with contract. Contract is an agreement between two parties. It says we'll do this in exchange for this. Current problem with contract is, okay, well, if one or the other party didn't follow through with what they said they were going to do, so sue me. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck to even have the resources to get into court to hold someone responsible for a contract breach. No one can afford that shit. Okay? They've made it so expensive to take advantage of the legal system for the average individual that we are slaves to the system, aren't we? Fuck that shit. This system is going to have covenant standard. Covenant has built in or else. You don't deliver on what it is you were supposed to do, or else is referred, and it gets executed. And in the eternal sense, that is up to and including whether or not you even fucking exist. This system is preparatory for the eternal outcome that's coming right up. (137) Covenant Registry. So once a covenant is made, who manages the record of them? Covenant Registry. If someone is in a position where the other party has breached covenant, or they themselves are in danger through some inability of their own to follow through on their side of the covenant, who do you call? Well, you would call 138, the Covenant Enforcement Referral Authority. You either advise them, well, I'm going to be in breach because, well, I can't, or they're in breach, man, blatantly. Now, if it's something that's a matter of something requiring like a military designation, they would make that referral. An example of that would be like, take for example, an internet company that says, we value your privacy, but they're fucking recording everything you do. That would be a military referral. (139) Key Authentication Authority. Okay, so if everyone in every device is given a key to access the system with, and to be identified in the system for things they do with the system, how is that authentication performed? Well, you have a Key Authentication Authority. The Key Authentication Authority looks at the key and they say, well, this is a valid key, or they say, no, it's not. If there's a case where you have like a hacker or a government or anybody trying to brute force crack the key authentication system, they're going to get designated as a military target immediately. It has to be this way. 140. Key Management Authority. Okay, so who gives you a key? Key Management Authority. If you manufacture devices that need to connect to the system, each single device has to have a key. Reason being is, say you have a situation where a hacker uses devices to try to inflict certain abuses on other individuals or aspects of the system, or gain access to things they shouldn't or don't have access to, and they're illegitimately doing it. You need to be able to turn that shit off. And when you turn it off, it never works again. Well, that would be done by the Key Management Authority. Doink. No more key. For a manufacturer of devices, they would register with the Key Management Authority using 141, New Device Key Application Authority. New Device Key Application Authority would look at you, look at your keys, look at your task operational structure, and determine, okay, you get keys. This is how many exactly. And they would send you, if you're a manufacturer, key installation modules that you would literally build into your device. It would require specifications of the device you were building, exact ones. If it is found that that key is being put into some other device, say a hacker in his garage building a device and takes it and puts it in that, well, that key gets turned off. It gets turned off. And there are ways to do that. One of the ways to do that for like a computing device, for example, is you can build a hardware profile key that interfaces with this key and has to pass a challenge and a handshake requirement in order to even function at the hardware level. This is not rocket science, man. So we're gonna do that. 142, Consumption Interaction Registry. Okay, so we're going to have some new physiologies that are going to become apparent. New kinds of people that you probably maybe suspected existed but weren't really sure. Well, they do. And some of them have higher or lower tolerances to substances than we do. Okay. So you have a consumption interaction registry to kind of catalog, okay, don't mix these things together. These are fine. Anything from foods, if you eat certain kinds of foods together, they'll kill you. You know? There's stuff like that. You know, if you're taking medication and you eat certain kinds of food, it'll kill you too. Like, it just depends on what you're talking about. So there should be a registry for that, especially with additional physiologies and especially bridging world to world, because we're gonna encounter a lot more consumables than I think people understand even exist. 143, Philosophical Organization Registry. What is a philosophical organization? A philosophical organization is one that seeks to train your mind in a permanent way toward a specific pattern of persuasion, man. Okay. It is something that endeavors to durably change how you think or to train you to think in a certain way. So these need to be registered. Not only so we know what they are, but so if you're looking for something and you want to be able to expand your potential in a specific direction, one of the ways to do that is through a philosophical organization. That's not something that's necessarily that popular here on Earth, but in other places it's very popular, to the point where they do that instead of have universities, man. It's more comprehensive, it's more thorough, it's more directional. The results are better. They don't do education like we do. Not at all. Ours is a total clusterfuck, man. And it's got to get better. 144, Religious Organization Registry. Okay, why would you want that? Well, for one thing, a religious organization is a specific type of task operational structure with certain privileges, man. For one thing, they are fairly independent and sovereign from government inherently. But also, what if government fails? And you have a situation where the military needs to come in and try to help the situation. There's no government to call up. The military essentially becomes enforcement in the area, but who the fuck do they call in order to get stuff done? Take, for example, the situation of Hurricane Katrina, where you had a whole shit ton of people stranded and without support, and the government completely failed to respond for days. Well, it would have been much more effective had there been a religious organization registry where response commanders could call locals up and be like, okay, what do you have in terms of organization that we can interface with? And can you mobilize immediately? A religious organization can mobilize way fucking faster than a military or a government. And in certain situations, you do want to call them. Okay? If there is a catastrophe, for example, that completely destroys a government's ability to operate in its own territory, who do you call? You want to call the religious organizations, man. You're going to be like, hey, we know you're having this problem. How are your local people doing? Do you need anything? Can you find out? Not only that, but a religious organization in general, in lieu of a government that's functional, can operate as a government for a time if needed. And that is incredibly useful as a means of interface for a military. If a military in the same nation, for example, experiences its corresponding governmental failure, who handles the daily? It's not the military. The military is responsible for maintaining order. Well, who handles, who liaises with the military on behalf of the people, man? On behalf of the population? Generally, you're going to want to reach out to religious organizations in an interfaith way. You have a lot of people, they reject the concept of religion, but man, they can appreciate organization in a situation like that. So it is necessary. 145, trust and grant management. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of things which people are going to want to contribute to in order to accomplish long-term objectives. That would be a trust. In terms of grant, governments or individuals or other philanthropic endeavors could contribute to an index that manages who gets it. Okay? And the Arbitration Authority would have oversight on this. So grant management is okay. For example, you have a grant you want to open up. You could make a grant for, okay, we want more individuals who need to learn more about this. Say it's astrophysics, and you can't find them. Well, you would reach out to the Grant Management Authority. Be like, hey, we want to offer scholarships for individuals with these aptitude specifications. Okay. Grant is a stipend for them while they're learning. Okay. Grant Management Authority posts that, and individuals would look at the Grant Management Authority's index. Or whatever. You'd have people, if they're looking for funding for something, especially funding that is not a loan, Grant Management Authority, man. There could also be, take for example an Indian tribe. They've got a bunch of land. They want to develop something that benefits them. They don't necessarily have the resources to do it, but they can grant the land with the agreement of, oh, okay, well, here's what we would do in return. on an ongoing basis. Stuff like that, man. Any nation, for example. Okay, we're looking to develop, but, we got this land and open it up as a grant. Okay? Something that benefits you long term. That would be like what that's for. Okay. 146, System Support Resource Management. Okay, so installing and maintaining the system is going to require some significant resources. What manages the pooling for those resources that are required for the system? And what manages the aspects of requirements and acquisition of resources to stand up and maintain the system? That would be this, System Support Resource Management. Principality level, but member contribution. Okay, and that would be built into the Basic Standards Agreement and as a covenant. $147, Decommissioned Material Handling Management. So it was brought up that, okay, well, there's going to be a lot of nations or other similar things, which we're going to find out about later, that use nuclear power for their power needs, man. So what do you do with the spent fuel? Okay, that would be an aspect of this job, decommissioned material handling management. What about other things, though? Like, okay, you have this material, they found out that they don't need a navy anymore, and they've got 1,000 ships. What do we do? Okay, well, you mothball them, and then you put them into a holding pattern, and then, as needed, you deconstruct them and use them for manufacturing. Well, who the hell helps with that? These. Decommissioned material handling management. What about wastewater? This. What about general management of things that are discarded? This. It's a specialization for what to do with things when you're done with them. Because that's a general problem. Everybody's got it, and some people have a lot better methods than others. 148, Genealogical Registry. So for those who have confirmed genealogy, or even from a census point of view, through family services, a snapshot of who's related to who right now, you would start with that and maintain that as a matter of record. Genealogical Registry. We need to know, for a lot of different reasons, who's from who biologically, and where did they come from. That's going to be a lot more important than you think it is coming up in the future. It's going to be critically important. And so this has to be a fundamental aspect that's extraneous to the system. It's a matter of record that is incredibly vital. 149, Historical Event Registry. This is not a place for historians to give a narrative on what they think happened, man. This is a direct registry of first-hand accounts and recordings of things that have happened. Okay? If you notice, if you watch YouTube, for example, you notice that they have a tendency to fucking delete things that are of historical significance, man. Because they don't like them. Well, Historical Event Registry would keep record of historical events and people who either from experiential record have a logging, or somebody who wants to say something about it who was there, give a first-hand account. This would be the place for that. Okay. And in terms of record, this is different from a public record in that it is specifically event driven. Okay. And it's specifically about events of historical value. So it's not just a matter of public record. It's a matter of specificity of event. Some people would be worried about, well, is this the memory hole? The people who monitor for that. No, what we have right now is a fucking memory hole. Okay? This would guarantee that we don't have one of those. Okay? The situation on the internet right now and what has been done with the internet, if you can remember an event that was significant, that was controversial, especially controversial to the government, go try to find shit about that on the internet. You may find that, well, it's been fucking memory holed already. That's not some kind of conspiracy theory. Go do it. Put it to the test. You will find out very fucking quickly. There is a lot of footage, there are a lot of accounts, there is a lot of everything that is just plain out fucking missing. You will also find, if you're paying attention, that all of the search engines have been updated to greatly restrict the amount of information they return. You know how Google used to, for example, have all those O's? Look how much we got on that. Try to page right all the way to the end. You'll find out that it just doesn't have shit after very soon. That's because they're selecting what you can know. They're selecting what you're able to even review. We're going to be designating people who do that shit as military targets. $150, Physiological Registry. So, okay, Physiological Registry, why would we need that? Well, we need an anatomical index for peoples. Okay, and how they work, how they function, how their bodies work. We also need like a general biological index. That's what this would be. Okay. A uniform biological index for physiology. For example, if peoples are traveling from place to place to place, well, what if for some reason the gates go down eventually and we're stuck with populations that are disparate and multiple physiologies in them? Well, you need a record of, well, okay, trauma happened to this individual. I've never seen one of these before. Where do you go to look that shit up if you're a surgeon? Quickly. Physiological Registry. Not to mention that if you want to see who's where and what they are, how they're made, or how at least how they look, Physiological Registry, man. You want to know, okay, well, what kind of animals are on this place? Physiological Registry. You know, you want to visit some place, but do they have snakes that bite? Are they venomous? What does the venom do to you? What do they look like? Okay, Physiological Registry. Make sense? That's about it for this one. I got other shit to do. These things are gonna happen. I know I keep saying that, but they will. We're in the generation of like instant expectation where it's like, okay, show me right now. Oh, you'll see. Okay. It's just gonna take some time to do. If you've ever been involved in project development or project management or anything related to projects, you know that, well, it's step, 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 step. You may have something to show, you may not, right up until development, until deployment. Okay, and development of this, once all of the specifications are agreed on, is going to go extremely fucking fast. It's going to be like a lightning strike everywhere. So, when you see that happen, I hope you remember this video, because this was in charge the whole time.